Greetings from Faraday Foundation and Faraday Studios. This is our third program in the Science Wizards Retrospective series. Jake, Wizard 4, will be sharing his thoughts about Hubert Alyea, Wizard 2. Jake, tell us about your personal encounters with Hubert and what you learned from him and what you put into practice in your own presentations based on his science communication style.
Well, I think I met Dr. Alyea, about 50 years ago. He was on the original group that started the National Science Teachers Association 50-some years ago, and he was on the committee that started that organization, and I was active in it. And that's when I would go to his lectures, and he was quite the star in the science education world. Walt Disney made a movie that he inspired, The Absent-Minded Professor. I even have a picture. We'll put it up there, but there he is. And that was Fred McMurray. The neat thing, Fred McMurray, Disney sent him to Princeton to watch Alyea speak, to get all the mannerisms for the movie. And as the story goes, Alyea was the American exhibit at the Brussels World's Fair in like 1957 or so. And he would do this lecture 6 times a day at the World's Fair in Brussels. And he noticed one day there was some gentleman on the back row that sat through 4 or 5 lectures, repeats. And they thought, well, he must be an usher or a security guard. And it was Walt Disney. And Disney came down afterwards. He said, Sir, I was so fascinated with what you said. And that led to the movie, The Absent-Minded Professor. And flubber, the goo inside the movie, this magical stuff, was a takeoff of the discovery of Teflon, the Nobel Prize winning thing, that one of his friends had developed at DuPont, Roy Plunkett, and they worked together on several projects. And so that's when I first met, no, I have to take that back because I forgot. I first saw him myself in 1961 or 2 at the Seattle's World's Fair when I was, I don't know, 6th grade, 7th grade. I can't remember but my dad, we went to the World's Fair in Seattle, and there he was lecturing there at the American exhibit. And he was doing, and I saw him 3 times. I stayed in there, and I was so fascinated with him. He signed an autograph. I didn't know who he was. But he was blowing stuff up. Oh my gosh. He was blowing stuff up, and a fascinating thing. And a few years later, when I was working for Mr. Wizard, I wanted to recreate some of the chemical reactions. And I called Doc up, and he remembered me. I studied chemistry with him, under him at Princeton at the Dreyfus Institute. And I want to know if he remembered who I was. He had lots of students, and he remembered me. And of course, what endeared him is he was a fan of Mr. Wizard. So I actually flew to New Jersey and stayed in his house and got to know him and kind of became his buddy for a while. I think all of his friends had passed away. He outlived all of his contemporaries. And there he was living in a house on the edge of the Princeton campus. And so I would go there and spend a few days, and he would go over chemical demonstrations with me. And I remember the first day I walked through his house, there was a plaque that said, "To Dr. Alyea, the world's greatest raconteur." And I didn't know what the word raconteur meant. I thought, well, what is that? I'd heard the word, but I'd never used it. And of course, it's a storyteller. The man could tell stories. And he was a beloved chemist at Princeton, and the students loved him because they said it was an easy A class. Because he walked students through chemistry so smoothly and easily that it was just like drinking honey. They learned this fantastic curriculum, and it was just as smooth. And one of the things Alyea taught me, he said, you know, Jake, don't you ever talk more than 3 minutes on a bit of chemistry, and then tell a story. He said he would not talk. I'll get down to the hardcore chemistry, and then I'll tell a story about it. He tried 3 minutes. I said, well, I don't know if I could stop at 3 minutes. I might explode if I tried to stop. And but that was one of the techniques. And he said you have to have a treasure chest of stories and anecdotes. And if he didn't have one, he'd bust out, he'd say a poem. He'd made up poems, or he'd sing a song, and he couldn't sing worth a darn, but he'd just bust out in song. He would do something every 3 or 4 minutes in his lectures, you know, and he was very personable. He had the Priestley Medal, which is like the Nobel Prize for chemists. And he worked at the Nobel Institute. He worked with every scientist that you can think of, Max Planck and Fritz Haber. And one day when he was at the Institute, the Nobel Institute in Europe working, they said that Dr. Einstein would like to see your work. I said, who? Albert Einstein? Albert Einstein? Yeah, he's coming. I want to see it. Because Alyea was working on chemical inhibitors. You know, anybody can start a chemical reaction, but how do you stop it at a certain point? You know, it's like the idea of, you have brakes on a car? I can make that car go fast, and I can steer it, but how do you stop it? And they go, I haven't figured that out yet. You know, so Alyea he worked on chemical inhibitors, and one of the things he used to test the results of his experiments was a long glass tube, 6 or 8 feet long, and you would look down through it, and you could see how much gas or whatever it was you were testing for was in the tube. You couldn't see it, and it was, but by how it bent the light. A way of measuring a gas was he'd have a little line, or I don't know what it was, an indicator, and it would be twisted a little bit, and the different density gas would make the light twist a little bit, and that's what. So you could look down through this tube to make a measurement. Looked like a telescope with a long glass tube. So Albert Einstein walks in, he goes, yes, was ist das? And they looked at it, and Albert Einstein, I understand. So Einstein walked down and looked in the wrong end of the tube. And there were all these photographers there with the press. And Alyea was going, oh gosh, I got to tell him. It's like telling somebody he's looking through the wrong end of binoculars. And all the press was standing there taking the pictures of this. What am I going to say to Albert Einstein? Einstein looked down through the tube and he goes, yes, this is not very interesting. I'm having some trouble here. And the only thing Alyea could think of, Herr Professor, you may have better luck at this end. So Einstein walked down, looked, and he said, wunderbar, this is wonderful. This is wonderful, oh, this is beautiful. And then all the cameras come up and all the reporters are scribbling, like, oh my God, he just made a fool out of Einstein. Oh my gosh, Einstein, click, 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 looking through the wrong end of the telescope. And Einstein looked at the press, I guess, as the story goes. He said, "'Tis better," see, well, how'd it go? "'Tis better to show your ignorance once rather than remain ignorant the rest of your life." I said, man, that guy could talk his way out of anything. That was impressive. That was, and Alyea could tell stories on just about any field of science at any time. He's such a good storyteller that right after World War II, oh, by the way, during World War II, before it started, the American Army was worried that the Germans were going to gas the United States, because, you know, they used gas during World War I, and they assumed that the Germans were good gas makers, I guess, so they were worried about that. So they put Alyea in charge of the America's plan to combat gas, you know, anti-gas warfare in the U.S., and he was in charge of that. And he had a captain for each state, and the captain of New Jersey was Albert Einstein. That's where they worked together. It was kind of neat to come up with the anti-gas strategy. They never had to use any of it, thank goodness. And that's how he kind of buddied up with Einstein. And you know, someday I'll tell all the Einstein and Alyea stories. I think they made a movie, it was about 20 years ago, called High Q. It was about Albert Einstein driving around Princeton campus with all these things going on with a bunch of guys in a 52 Chevy convertible or something. But it was kind of true. There's a little bit of truth to that, because Einstein, as Doc told me, was disliked the press so much that he couldn't get out without somebody taking his picture. They'd go to the Princeton golf course. on Sunday afternoons. He didn't play golf. They'd just sit under trees and read, and their kids or grandkids would play in the brook there. And that's where they told all these stories and developed their relationship.
Hey, Jake.
I can talk about that. Yeah.
I understand that Hubert was also known as Dr. Boom. Can you describe some demonstrations of his that contributed to this curious name?
First of all, he would, Dr. Alyea was jovial. He would laugh all the time, laugh at his own, and he'd get everybody laughing and all that thing like that. And that was what he was known for, that he was so friendly. But he liked to blow things up. It was fun. And he had things exploding or changing colors fast, or really colorful reactions, or doing something like that. And sometimes he would get the mixture just right. And he told me stories, an occasional window might get knocked out, or some, a piece of glassware knocked off a shelf or something like that. He did that on occasion. And if you ever went up to him and he would mix the chemicals, and he would on purpose be sloppy, get everybody nervous, like, oh, nitric acid, oh my God, no, that's not nitric acid, no, it's water, never mind, okay. But he'd do stuff like that. And he'd start putting stuff together, and the thing would start to boil, and he'd go, don't worry about this. Everybody, don't worry about it. I've done this experiment 4 times. And so it's fairly safe. So don't worry about it. But he blew things up all the time. And people kind of expected that. As a matter of fact, I have in the studio some of his combustion, we'll get a picture of it, put it up here. He used cream cans. He grew up on a farm, but they had these heavy metal cans that you'd put cream in from the dairy, I guess at the dairy farm they put cream in. And cream cans were just the right size to give a nice, loud explosion, but not be too big as to be a hazard to anybody in the audience. So I think up on the shelf, and we'll get a picture of them later, are some of Dr. Alyea's cream cans that he used to fire off.
I understand, and I don't know how true this is, but one story during my research said that he occasionally burned his suit or the clothes he was wearing. Do you know anything about that?
No, it looked like, he'd been in a wrestling match sometime. He would spill stuff, and he did have polio when he was a young teenager. And he got it in his face, and it kind of messed up, so he kind of tilted. And he had that wasn't a speech impediment, but sometimes he'd get a little, I don't know what the technical term is for it, but he'd get a little tongue-tied literally, or whatever the thing was going on. But that's what made everybody love him, because he just forged ahead, and even if the slobber was spraying and stuff like that. So he loved to throw chemicals together and go, ooh, and just to build up some dramatic, I guess, tension. Dramatic tension is what he did. Yeah, but he'd burn himself, and what was amazing to me, he would put something would catch on fire. Like if this would catch on fire, what would you do? You get fire. He'd just pick it up, wad it up in his hands. Just put it out.
I know there's one picture in my gallery, my Alyea gallery, of him taking a CO2 cartridge and spraying the audience with it. I thought that was kind of strange.
If anybody was still asleep, he would watch, and if anybody fell asleep or if he saw a good potential victim, he would play on that a little bit. If he could get a scream out of somebody or somebody nod off, he'd wake them up. And he'd go out into the audience. I mean, he'd walk around and he'd talk, and he became everybody's friendly uncle, I guess. People adored him. Yeah.
This would be a great time, Jake. Would you do one of his demonstrations for us?
Now, Alyea taught me that if I was going to be a wizard, there was a magic, it's like a Harry Potter movie or something. This is called Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath, which is, I said, well, what in the world is Dragon's Breath? It's lycopodium. You say, well, that doesn't help. Lycopodium is a fern. And if you've ever been around a pine tree or something that's a certain time of the year, that you'll see all the spores or the yellow powder come off the tree. And sometimes it just rains yellow powder and it's all over your car and stuff like that. Well, the Lycopodium fern, its spore is so fine. It's finer than sawdust, or it's finer than powdered sugar. It's just so fine. And it's mostly cellulose, like wood. Same stuff that wood. So scientists use this, teachers, they'll use it in all sorts of demonstrations. They'll float it on water to see surface tension phenomena or whatever. And it's just and it's light and it's dry. It combusts rapidly. So one of his demonstrations, you'd always see him with this is his Lycopodium jar that he'd had. And always kept some handy. And of course, his lecture piece was, here's a match. Now, right, if I want to get this match to burn twice as fast, what do I do? Oh, see, you were thinking like a scientist for a second there, right? That one's going to burn my finger. So if I want to get this stick of wood here to burn exactly twice as fast, most kids would say, well, throw some gasoline on there. Or so. Well, that would be too fast. So all you have to do, of course, is light the other end. So now it's burning twice as fast. Well, if it would work. There we go. So there it's twice as fast, right? Now, since I'm an old man, I'm going to blow it out. I don't want to burn. But we can pretend like it's still burning. And if I would break this in the center and light the ends, how fast would it be burning then? I say, well, 4 times as fast, because you got 4. And if I broke them again, it'd be 8 times, 16, 30. And you say, oh, do you see a pattern there? The scientists look for patterns. And the kids would say, oh, yeah, it doubles every time you, oh, yeah, it doubles. So let's just keep breaking this thing out, 4 times fast, 8, 16, see how far they go, 32, 64, 128, 256, Finally you get up to 2,000. Now picture in your mind something burning 2,000 times faster than that. What would that be like? And see, at that moment, if you get a kid to picture in their head what 2,000 times fast, that's the end of the day for you. You're going, okay, class is over. I actually got you to stop, to lay down your computer or whatever and think, oh, 2,000, what would that be like? So I'm going to take as much cellulose, so there's about the same mass as that candlestick, that matchstick. So that's about the same. It weighs about the same. I'm going to light this on fire and see 2,000 times as fast as that wood stick. Yeah, go ahead, like that. Ooh, that's pretty sweet. I'll do that again. I like that. That was 2,000 times as fast, by the way, in case you were counting. I can usually count up to about 1,800, then I start to stutter. So he did lots of experiments using Lycopodium, and it's easy to make it, it's safe. It's not like gunpowder. If you hit it with a hammer, it won't blow up or anything. But there it is. And he just and sometimes he'd set his hands on fire, because I've got Lycopodium on my hand, and it'll come back, but that's all right. Whee, there it is. Dragon's breath.
So I would assume that's why you don't light a match in a dusty barn.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what he would do, and you'll see a picture of it. Well, right there in that picture over your right shoulder there, that's some Lycopodium going off there right in front of him. He's squirting that with a bulb up.
Jake, I know you covered a lot of this, but maybe you can delve a little bit deeper. What aspects of Hubert's personality contributed to his popularity and fame the most?
Well, I tell you, when I was fortunate enough a couple years ago to speak at the Royal Institution, I pretty much copied one of his lectures. His notes. And matter of fact, before he passed away, he signed over the rights to his materials to me, which I then have to give to Wizard 5 if we ever find the person. And so I decided, there I was in London at the Royal Institution, and I was about to die of panic attack. I was like, oh, this is it. Faraday's desk, Wizard 1's desk, and I'm doing the Wizard 2's lecture. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, I get me. So I tried to behave as though Alyea did. I made eye contact with the audience. I smiled. I got them to smile. I tried to be the friendliest person they'd ever met. And Alyea was the one, he always said, humble fellowship. He enjoyed the humble fellowship of true scientists. He said, true scientists are humble. I said, well, that's hard for me because, of course, the way I would think, okay, then I will be the most humble person on the planet. I'll get the humble award. You know, that's me. I'll just go right for it. Yeah. He was such a humble man and so kind and jovial. So I decided to do that at the Royal Institution. And when I was done with the lecture, I applaud, and I noticed when I was doing it, all people were leaning out in their chairs and they were grinning. They weren't just smiling, they were grinning. And you don't do that at the Royal Institution that often, because people used to dress up in ties and stuff, and very stiff stuff, and people would lecture on things. And afterwards, the host said, well, any of you like to meet Professor Jacobs, go over to this door here and shake his hand or whatever. And I thought, yeah, I'll get 2 people. There's 450 seats at the Royal Institute. Almost the whole theater stood up and got in line to come. And they started bringing their kids, wanted to hug me. And people wanted to rub they come up and they start rubbing my shoulder. And they were handing me their kids like I was the Pope or something. Would you bless my child, please, and heal him of his affliction? I don't know. And they were hugging, and these kids were grabbing my legs. I thought, well, what is this? And the next day when we were having our evaluation, the director came in and said, Dr. Jacobs, in the 200-year history of the Royal Institution, that's the first time the lecturer was hugged by the audience that we know of. We just don't hug here. And I was hugged. Well, that was the way people felt about Alyea. I want to hug that thing, man. He was just so huggable. You wanted him to be your Uncle Hug. And there he was, this great scientist. And probably the best thing Dr. Alyea did for me before he knew it was about the end of his life and the last time I'd probably see him because he wasn't feeling too good, he did print up the history of his life. My life as a chemist. And he was going to get somebody to publish it. Well, nobody wanted to publish that. I mean, he's a nice guy, but so he said, I published my own. He went out and bought a mimeograph machine. And he hand typed this book on mimeograph stencils. So the typing's kind of bad, but it is so cool, everything about his life and what he did. And some of the stuff is just stunning. Like right after World War II, the whole planet was what's this atomic energy stuff? What is that? They just blew up Japan. Well, hold on here. And now the Russians are doing this thing. What is atomic energy? What is that? Nobody knew. And it was the end of the world. So Alyea went around the world, 88 countries. The UN sent him. UNESCO, and he made a lecture called Atomic Energy Weapon for Peace. And he presented that. Some people say, he prevented World War III. Now I know that's exaggerating, but it had an impact, that lecture, just easing people's minds that it's not the end of the world. It is a dangerous thing that we have to maintain and monitor, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. I suppose it could be. So that's what he did. And he printed this book up, and just before he passed away, he went into a nursing home and he passed away, he sent me this book and it says, to my twin wizard, Stephen Jacobs, with gratitude for his friendship, Hubert Alyea, 6/20/92. So, and he didn't last much after that. So this is a duplicated book. It's kind of cool. I made a duplicate. Now look at here. Walt Disney's comic book. Walt Disney's Absent-Minded Professor comic book. There he is. So that's Alyea there, the Absent-Minded Professor. And that's Fred McMurray playing the Absent-Minded Professor. So there it is. So that's quite a,
There's some wonderful stories.
oh, it just goes on and on and on. And just look him up online and see all the things he did, what he did at the World's Fair and all that kind of stuff. But he was a science communicator and storyteller, you know. But, and the best thing he did for me, very selfishly, he said, Jake, I'm going to have to trust you with this. I've worked on this I didn't get it published. I wish I could have published it before I pass on. So what is it? He said, I've been working on it for years. I have discovered the recipe for the perfect martini. And I don't drink alcohol, so I wouldn't know a good martini. And so with great care, he took me into the kitchen, and for a couple hours, we went through this exacting process of how to make the perfect martini. And I knew there had to be something to it, because I'm not exaggerating, no matter where we were, sometime in the late afternoon, this is what this man would do. He'd go, it must be 5 o'clock. And you look at your watch, and it was, with 5 minutes on either side. It's time for a martini. And he'd have one martini a day, maybe two, special day, but one martini a day, keep you young and healthy. Flushes out your kidneys, flushes out your liver, makes you feel good. Come on, let's have a martini. But this one. So he told me how to make the martini, and that I'll have to share that recipe sometime. So
Well, Jake, is there anything
what else
else
can I
that
say?
you would like to add before we close?
Yeah, there is something. Two things real quick. The stories he could tell were endless. Like he took me by Nassau Hall, which used to be the headquarters on the university campus, and he said the president of the university designed a system to signal his maid in the house next door that he was coming home for tea, and he took a wire and hooked it up to a battery cell, and he made a little device, and he would tap on it and let her know that I'll be home in 5 minutes, put the teapot on. So a little bell in the kitchen of the house next door would ring. And one day a visiting person was there, and they said, would you want some tea? Well, so he tapped on this thing, little switching device that he made, to let the maid know. Well, the guy's name that was there was Samuel Morse. Go figure. Morse code. True story, according to Alyea. That's it. You wonder where he got the idea for doing this thing? He said, yeah, okay. That was he just had stories like that. Just curl your toes. So Albert Einstein, his neighbor, people would always try to trap Einstein into making a statement about God and religion. You know, trying to get him to commit to something. And Einstein was a Zionist. He was Jewish, and I think he was in favor of the Palestinian thing that happened in '49 or whatever year it was. But he was very wary of people trying to pin him down on anything. And somebody presented Albert Einstein with a Christian Bible, thinking that you should have this, and to Albert Einstein, you know. And Einstein was a very friendly guy, and he probably took it. He said, well, thank you so very much. Thank you very much. But he really didn't have any use for a Christian Bible. So Alyea was a neighbor, and he said, Alyea, are you a Christian? Yes, I am a Presbyterian. Well, that's Christian, isn't it? He said, that's still up to kind of. So I know. So Alyea took it home, and he noticed that somebody had gone through and circled a few verses, like they'd been reading and underlined something. Well, he knew it was Einstein, had circled a few things. Just didn't know if it was like circling it for bad or circling it because it's good. I don't know why he circled it, but he circled it. So Alyea went through that Bible, and he put a yellow highlighter marker on some verses he thought that he could live by and were good. So one night I was spending the night there at his house, and I saw that Bible there, and I said, is that your Bible? He said, yeah, you're welcome to read it if you'd like. And he said, what's one of your favorite verses? Do you have a favorite verse? And I said, I have a handful. So just check yours out. So I went to one of my favorite verses. I opened up, and I said, and there it was Psalms 34. Psalms 37, 4. fourth verse. And it had been, somebody had drawn a line under it, and somebody else had put a yellow highlighter on it. Then I was the third guy to look at this thing, and I said, well, that's my faith. Those guys stole that from me. That was my thing. Seek your happiness in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. So I figured if it good enough whoever wrote that, and good enough for Einstein, and good enough for Alyea, I said, that's good enough for me too. So that was that touched my heart very deeply, and I appreciate Doc for that. Go figure.
Thanks, Jake.
Yeah.
Some great stuff there.
And I hit less than 1/2 of I hit less than 1/2% of what we could say about that man. But he was a saint. And everybody loved him. Everybody that knew him loved him and adored him. Yeah. I haven't gotten to that point yet. I've gotten to the point where people will tolerate me. Yeah, almost. They'll tolerate me. But I still do this. I've studied chemistry for 4 years now. I love that one. And you can see I got lycopodium all over my sleeves. It's all over the tabletop. What are you going to do?
All right, thanks, Jake, for another look back as we continue to explore your gathered thoughts about your Science Wizards predecessors. Our next program will feature Don Herbert, better known as Mr. Wizard. I think you'll find our next program to be especially engaging as we learn about the unique association that Jake had with Don.